inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
When you own rental properties, a lot of great things are going to happen, but you're going to have some challenges and you're going to have some roadblocks along the way. And that's exactly what happened to my guest today. They bought their first 6 rental properties in a fairly short period of time, and things have mainly gone well, but they have had a couple of hiccups along the way. And on the podcast today, they're going to give us a real honest look into exactly how things have gone and how they overcame some of the challenges. Joining us on the podcast today from Waynesboro, Virginia, are husband and wife team Darrell Cole and Ana Duarte. We'll take a really quick break. We'll thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll meet our guests. The first step in buying a rental property is to get pre-qualified. And I would suggest you work with a lender that specializes in working with investors, because the last thing you want to have happen is to get to closing and find out the money's not there and you can't close. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and she'll pre-qualify you for free if you mention Rental Income Podcast. Find out more today. Contact Chaley at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056. When I'm doing research to buy a new rental property, there's a lot of different websites, apps, and then a spreadsheet that I use to do my analysis. It's really kind of a convoluted process. Well, there's a much easier way. There's an app called Ask Rick. That's RIC for Rental Income Calculator. Ask Rick makes it really easy to find and analyze rental properties. You can see all the properties for sale in an area. If something looks good, you can press one button. It'll analyze the property for you. It'll figure out the rent amount. It'll figure out your mortgage payment, all your expenses, and give you your cash flow. If you're ready to move forward, you can make an offer right there on the app, or you can send the information over to your realtor to do some more investigation into the property. You can try it out for free right now. Just search for Ask Rick. That's RIC, Ask Rick in the App Store, or go to justascrick.com. That's justascrick.com. Let's start at the beginning of your story. So you were living in Texas. You bought a house to live in, and you rented out rooms. The rent from those rooms was enough to cover your mortgage, so you were living for free. You were house hacking. You did that for a few years, and then you decided you wanted to move back to Virginia. So you sold the house, and you got lucky. The market had appreciated. You had some profit on that property, and you wanted to buy some rental properties when you got to Virginia, and you wanted to use that money that you made as your down payment. So talk to me about the properties you bought. Like, how did you find them? Like, where did you start looking for rentals?
Very interesting story. I think I was in the backyard, like raking leaves or something. So this older gentleman kind of yelled at me from across the fence, and we just started talking. I told him my idea of buying rentals. He happened to be one of the biggest property managers in our little town, and he managed, like 30 single family homes. And he said that he knew of a guy who wanted to sell some.
Beautiful. I mean, that is like really the smartest thing anybody can do if you're looking to buy rental properties is talk to everybody, because you never know where that might lead. Let everybody know what you're trying to do. So then he introduced you to the owner, and you guys worked out a deal to buy these properties?
Yep, pretty much. The 4 houses they had been rentals forever. They were in pretty rough shape. They needed a ton of work. But it was, a fair price. And we came to an agreement and we bought all 4 together.
Now, did either of you guys feel like, wow, like maybe this is a little bit risky? We're buying 4 houses at the same time. Ana, were you scared at all, or did it seem risky, like buying 4 properties that maybe you guys were getting in over your head?
Actually, no. We ran the numbers really well with different strategies, and the numbers made sense completely. So it was just, let's do it.
Okay. And Darrell, you felt the same way? Like this just makes a lot of sense?
Yeah, I was fairly confident. My mom was always the one, saying be careful and go slow.
Yeah.
And we totally ignored that advice, I guess.
Yeah, I think actually it's really bad advice to go slow because, I mean, the problem with buying one rental property is you're just constantly on this roller coaster ride where if the tenant is paying rent and nothing wrong happens to the property, you're happy because you're covering all your expenses and you're making money. But the second that tenant moves out or you have a major repair, you've got nothing. I mean, like everything dries up. But with you guys buying four properties all at the same time, you're almost more diversified so that if you do have a vacancy in one of the properties, you still have three tenants paying rent. So it's almost like, do you feel like it's a lot safer to have more properties?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And we also really like multiplexes, which we don't have any yet.
Yeah.
But so this kind of feels like a fourplex or something.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And they're all pretty much next to each other, so they're on the same street.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, yeah, that makes it easier, a lot easier to keep an eye on everything. So,
Right.
were there tenants in the properties when you bought them? Were they all fully occupied?
They were fully occupied. The guy we bought them from didn't do a whole lot of maintenance. There were zero updates. So they were rented pretty low to, definitely low income tenants.
So you said that these properties that when you bought them, they were in pretty bad shape. So were you fixing these properties up as they turned over, or are you kind of leaving them in maybe not the best condition?
We're fixing them up pretty nicely.
Okay.
We had a tenant move out almost immediately as we bought it. And so that just made it, clear as to which one we were going to work on first.
Okay.
And we still had some cash left over to rehab it. So that house went from the lowest rent, which at the time I think was like $450, to rent that it now rents out for $750.
Awesome. That's almost a double. That's great. So what did you do to the house to double the rent like that?
Well, it had some foundation issues, which was, part of the reason we got the house cheap. So we had to jack the house up and brace it up. And then we just rehabbed the interior to make it really nice. We actually put granite countertops in it. And new cabinets. Appliances were secondhand, but they looked nice and almost new.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's awesome. So you're just going to redo the properties one at a time as they turn over?
That's correct, yes.
I also think that's a great strategy because you don't need to put a whole bunch of money into the properties on day one. You can continue to collect the cash flow, and then as they turn over, fix them up, make them nicer. I think that's a really, really good strategy. Let's talk about the financing. So how did you finance these properties?
So I called a banker, and we had just moved to the area, so we just kind of randomly picked a bank.
And no, too, because we moved here, we changed careers. We're both self-employed. You can't get a loan very easily.
Right.
Being self-employed for less than 2 years. So we had to be very creative on our financing in this case.
Yeah, what a challenge. Like, yeah, that's right. All right. So you guys both had, when you guys were in Austin, you both had W-2 jobs. Now you're moving to Virginia. You guys are both self-employed. So yeah, was that a challenge? Did a lot of banks just want nothing to do with you guys?
Yeah, that was a very good learning experience. The four houses that we were looking at buying, we paid $207,000 for the four, and we had $140,000 in the bank from the Austin sale. So we thought it was going to be extremely easy because we didn't need that much more.
Right.
Of course, we didn't want to spend all of our money, but we just thought, if we have it in the bank, they can see that we can cover this. This is going to be easy. So I called the banker up and, kind of told him what our thoughts was and what our plans was. And, so as I started telling him the details, he stopped me and he said, "Wait a minute, did you say you want to buy 4 houses at once?" And, I said, "Yes, sir." And he literally laughed out loud. And he was like, there's nothing I can do for you. And I had a bit of a panic, I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe we are going too fast. We're getting in over our heads. We don't know what we're doing. This banker sees that we almost can buy this stuff in cash, but he's still not willing to help us.
Right.
So that kind of scared me a little bit, but really it was just an opportunity to learn. And then Ana, I think, made a few phone calls and made some contacts. And we basically, the second banker we went to was a commercial banker. And, he looked over the numbers and he said no problem and approved us right on the spot.
Well, they still ask for our financial information. They still look at our credit and all that other stuff.
But they must not have cared much because we were not making any money at all.
Yeah.
But the numbers make completely sense. Even in the current condition of the houses when we got them, it's still paid for the mortgage. The income from it.
Now, the downside to commercial financing is that it's not fixed for 30 years like a regular traditional mortgage would be. They generally, the rate floats every couple of years. How long is your rate set for?
So it changes every 2 years.
Okay.
And it just recently changed, and it actually went down.
Yeah, that's awesome with the rates being so low. That's
that was just luck. That was just pure luck.
Yeah. So now that you guys have a track record and you've been doing this for a few years, do you ever think about refining out of that commercial loan just with the risk that the rates could go up at some point in the future?
It's something to keep in the back of our minds for sure. It has a maximum that could only go up 2% at a time.
Okay.
And even at that, it would, it'd be jumping. I think it's in the 4s now.
Okay.
So
yeah,
it's not going to do that for another 2 years. So
yeah, I would just keep an eye on that. If rates do start jumping, you might want to get out of that. But I mean, who knows what's going to happen to rates in the future? So if they do end up staying low for a long time, you could be fine. Let's talk about your tenants. You said one property turned over right after you bought it. How about your other 3 tenants? How did they work out?
I would say none of them were any good.
Oh, really? Okay. So,
one was a Section 8, so, at least that check came on time every month. The other 2, I guess there wasn't anything really wrong with the tenants themselves. They were just really dirty and filthy.
Mm-hmm.
And, but that's...
They were also the lowest rents.
Yeah, it was the lowest rent possible. It was just low income people. And I think it was the product of the house. That's the only type of person you're going to get with a house that looked like that.
Yep. Yeah.
And it really was just another learning experience for us, saying this is not how we want to run things. We want to clean it up and make it look pretty and try and get better quality people in there, higher rent, and hopefully the people will take better care of the houses too.
Yeah, that's always kind of the way it works when you have a really crappy property. A lot of times you're going to attract crappy tenants. So if nobody wants to live in a really bad rental property. So if you make it nicer, it's going to attract a higher quality person. And then also like someone that can afford a rent at $750 is going to be a different type of tenant than someone that's looking to pay $450 a month. So it's kind of putting you into almost a better type of tenant.
The first tenant that moved out, that was probably the one that caused more difficulties in a way. But when they moved out, we found out that they built a bedroom in the attic, and this is a 1930s house with no structure to. It couldn't really hold a third bedroom. So they didn't talk to the previous owner about it either. So no one knew about it.
Well, so I mean, you guys have had your fair share of challenges with these properties. Was there ever a time when you felt, oh my God, maybe we did get in over our heads? Maybe did you ever feel discouraged at any point that this is really becoming kind of a huge hassle?
We're kind of at that point right now.
Okay.
But I think it's more that, we don't have the funds to, to really go full time. We don't have quite enough cash flow to do this full time.
Yeah.
We would love to buy another 4 and do it all over again. But now that we're kind of done rehabbing the properties that we have, we could refinance, but we kind of like where our equity is, it makes us kind of feel safe.
Sure. Yeah.
So we're just going to kind of ride these out for a while.
Okay. And then tell me about your other 2 rentals.
So the one we live in is interesting. It was a business, like 30 years ago, and it's been just an abandoned building since then. So they had an office, and then they had a business, and then they had an apartment that was upstairs. And so we bought this property, took weeks just to clean it out because it was just filled with all their old equipment that was just completely abandoned. And so we got a permit from the city to turn it into a duplex.
Awesome.
So we fixed up the little tiny apartment, pretty quickly, and that's where we're living right now. And then the other apartment is going to be our next project that we haven't started yet.
Awesome. All right. So you're almost turning that into a house hack. So I guess you really are turning that into a house hack. So when you get that other apartment fixed up, will that cover your mortgage?
So we actually paid cash for this place.
Okay.
It was just abandoned. The guy that we bought it from had inherited it, but he lived out of town and he didn't want anything to do with it. So he was, it was just costing him money because he had to pay the taxes and he had to pay somebody to come mow the grass and stuff like that.
Okay. Well, that'll be great then. With no mortgage on it, how much will the other rental or the other side rent out for?
Like $650 or something like that.
That's great. Okay. So you've got the 4 houses and then that duplex. So that's your portfolio, or did we miss anything?
There's one more.
Okay.
I was counting that duplex as just
one
property.
Okay. Yeah.
And then so there's one more that was similar to the 4 houses. We bought it cheap because it had foundation issues. And we're doing a rehab on that, and we're almost done with that one. So that one's a 3-bed, 2-bath. We bought it as a 2-bed, 1-bath, and then it had a full-size basement with walkout door. So we put a bedroom and a bathroom down there.
Okay, great. That sounds. And how much will that rent out for?
That one is in a really good part of town. 3-bed, 2-bath, probably $1,200, $1,250.
Nice. Okay. Wow. I think you guys are off to a real good start with your portfolio. I think you definitely shouldn't feel discouraged. I know that it can be tough sometimes, but I think you guys are doing great.
I think the biggest thing, I would maybe do slightly different is, try to find some properties that didn't need quite so much rehab.
Yeah.
Because we've dumped all of our cash into the rehab.
Yeah.
And, the next step would be go into refinance. But, what we forget when we're all learning about the BRRRR strategy is that the refinance is hard when you don't have enough income to qualify for some of those personal loans.
That's actually a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. When you're doing the BRRRR strategy, you definitely want to make sure that you're talking to your lender early in the process and making sure that you're going to be able to get that long-term financing when your rehab is done. That is a very good point and something that a lot of people overlook. Well, if anybody is in the Waynesboro, Virginia area and you want to get together and talk real estate, Ana runs a meetup group for local investors. She would love to connect with you. She's also an agent, so if anyone is looking to buy anything in that area, you can get in touch with Ana just by going to my website at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 267. I'd like to thank today's sponsor for making this episode possible. It's Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. If you are looking to buy a rental property, whether you're just getting started or you want to add to your portfolio, the lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge. She's a nationwide lender and she specializes in helping investors buy rental properties. She's got a ton of different programs and she can find something that'll work for you in your particular situation. If you want to find out more or set up a time to talk to Chaley, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE, lendinggroup.com. If you mention Rental Income Podcast, she will waive all the pre-qualification fees. NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If this is your first time here, make sure you subscribe. We have new interviews every single Tuesday. And if you subscribe, you'll get notified as soon as they come out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.